Hi, Jennifer Warren here. And today I want to sort of advance some of the conversations I've been having about tech adoption, AI adoption, and some of the energy equations connected to it. So, after Nvidia's last earnings call just last week, I sort of culled some high-level takeaways regarding what Jensen Huang said. And also, I'm putting together things I've learned at some conferences. One was an AI summit at the end of April, and then some of the work I presented as well. And so I'm kind of playing forward everything I've been working on, including this feature from March about digital infrastructure and AI adoption and all that. So something I can say is things are moving faster even than I could imagine. I thought that every 6 months there's major advances. It looks like it's kind of every 3 months in some respects. We've had some really interesting announcements, even by the government, with the idea of sovereign AI, and we saw this in the announcements by Saudi Arabia for a 500 megawatt AI factory, if you will, in the UAE for like a 5 gigawatt AI factory. Also, the Department of Energy just announced a partnership with Nvidia, and I think it was Dell, and they're going to develop these sort of AI supercomputers of the future to do some really interesting workloads ahead for, high performance computing, basically. So, on some of the AI developments, and these are just ideas I've sort of culled again from listening to Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia, both from the GTC conference a few months back and even just the recent earnings call. So, there had been the focus on generative AI, ChatGPT, all the large language models, and there still is, and all that is still very much evolving. But generative AI is being asked to work, to do more, and thus enter the agentic AI era. And there's like many applications that are getting developed across the hyperscalers, cloud service providers, and enterprises. And I would say the hyperscalers and the cloud service providers are a little bit leading the pack, and enterprises are starting to play in the space as well. And another thing that Huang said was that AI scaling laws, because of agentic AI and reasoning, that there's like 100 times more compute needed than anticipated. And so a lot of the GPUs and all the infrastructure, the hardware that is coming out of NVIDIA is getting, more dense, higher density compute potential, and that's also driving adoption and AI workloads. There's still a lot of regular workloads, but something I've learned too is that, and this is from the Dell earnings call, is that a lot of the cloud service providers or enterprises are making space, taking space from their regular workloads, regular digital workloads on the cloud and whatnot, and making space for these AI workloads. And the AI build out in terms of data centers, Huang was forecasting that it was $1 trillion by 2030 to build out this digital infrastructure hardware for AI. But now he sees it sooner. And this is also on a global scale. It's not just the United States, although the United States is absolutely the number one market for all this presently. So it's both that the number of data centers are increasing, but it's also very much what's inside the data center that's changing, with these AI workloads. So you're going to see, simultaneous regular workloads and AI workloads going on at the same time, and this will be shifting over time. And also, something I picked up on, we had heard that there were these leases being canceled by Microsoft, by Google, and other hyperscalers. And what that sounds like to me is they're rethinking leases based on some of these shifts in workloads. And also, I'm sure some of it has to do with power. Power is the huge constraint and facilitator for all this in the future. So there's a lot of complex equations going on related to, AI workloads, energy, and future energy efficiency with how you develop these AI factories and within the data center, what's happening. So also Huang mentioned that AI started in the cloud. It needs the infrastructure of the cloud, and machine learning very much requires that type of infrastructure as well. But it's not limited. AI is not limited to the cloud and sees it as going everywhere. While cloud service providers are sort of the leading edge of this, it's not going to stay that way. It's really the tech infrastructure stack that Huang said is most important. And I talked about that a little bit in the really wild AI ride feature that I had in March of this year. So again, it is this tech stack that matters a lot. And when he talks about these AI factories and certain expectations and projections to scale all this, he says, we're going to have to wait. It's not happening right away, but a lot of the vision is kind of clearer about what is happening and what's on the horizon. So now I want to just mention a little bit about some user cases that I'm starting to see. So obviously Dell, downstream, so to speak, or in partnership with Nvidia, has really got a lot of activity, and they have some Nvidia enterprise AI systems that they're developing, and their revenues and their backlog in the future is looking quite healthy. Also mentioned is Capital One. I've seen them mentioned in a few different earnings calls. Now, Capital One has always been sort of a technology leader. They were like probably one of the first large banks to really use the digital platform more so than others. Um, and so they're also trying to, utilize this tech stack differently. The other users that are kind of emerging in terms of AI is sovereign AI. And we've had those announcements again in the Middle East, the ones that we saw with the Trump administration. But there are other country announcements that are happening. And specifically, this is from the recent earnings call. Recent announcements include AI factories in Taiwan, Sweden, Saudi Arabia, UAE. Also, Japan, Korea, India, Canada, France, the UK, Germany, Italy, Spain, all are building national AI factories. So, if I had to kind of look at this in a holistic, normal person way, I would say that, it's the G7 economies doing this, but then a lot of Asia-leaning economies that are already sort of tech-leaning countries, if you will. Those countries that really developed into middle and upper income countries over the last 2 decades beyond Japan. So it's that whole quadrant there in Southeast Asia and Asia. So that's interesting, and it also has interesting implications to do with energy. Again, being the great equalizer there. The other user, obviously, of AI tech are the LLMs, the model developers like Anthropic, OpenAI, and big tech as well. Google, Meta, they're all, developing their own models, and there's just way more activity happening, and you're seeing all these sort of like bifurcations in the market and different things happening. So it's very much becoming pervasive. I was talking about it becoming pervasive in October after a conference I had attended at the Atlanta Fed, but now you can really see what the pervasiveness is looking like, and it's really fascinating. So it is a real, sea change in the way the digital economy is changing. So I just want to mention a couple of highlights that I culled from the Dell earnings call, focused sort of on AI growth. There was like 12.1 billion in AI server orders. a $15.4 billion backlog on top of the quarterly orders, and so on and so forth. And over 3,000 enterprise customers were buying Dell AI factories. This is kind of interesting to do with how the infrastructure is developing. This gives you a sense of how things are moving because there's just so many questions that we can't really put our heads and arms around just yet. But here's some ideas. So Dell described the business as lumpy and nonlinear due to dependencies on data center construction, power infrastructure, and liquid cooling systems. So the whole supply chain connected to the data center where you're going to house all this AI infrastructure, is moving in ways to do with how the physical world operates. So that is also the constraint when you think about the development. It can only move as fast as the physical world can move in some respects. Um, and so the other thing I mentioned too is that this was from Dell again, that their customers are consolidating traditional workloads to make space, power, and cooling available for new AI workloads, which indicates that these customers, these tech customers, see AI as a way to enhance performance. Otherwise, they would not be making these shifts. So they're trying to upgrade their systems and have the capacity to have more high performance computing in the future. So last, I just want to touch on energy just a tiny bit. So when I was at this AI summit at the end of April, and it was at Oklahoma State University, sponsored by the Ham Institute. Something that was mentioned was this was by Anthropic, and they estimated that there was going to be 50 gigawatts needed by 2027 to power AI developments. That sounds like a large amount, and it kind of is, but there's a lot of ways to get to those 50 gigawatts. And obviously, a big beneficiary is going to be natural gas. And I have seen estimates all over the map on how many BCFs are going to be required for this. The CEO of a major midstream firm said that he projects 3 to 8 BCFs needed for AI and 10 for LNG. I heard higher numbers than that in February from an energy expert at a summit as well by NAPE, and there was probably almost 2 times the amount of BCFs of natural gas needed in the future for both LNG, also manufacturing, some of the onshore manufacturing. Don't forget that requires a lot of natural gas as well, and as well as AI. And obviously, the digital infrastructure AI equation will also be supported by renewables because we have a lot of renewables capacity. And so they're going to, suck up some of that power as well. And so it's getting really interesting. And I see in sort of an investment context, if you look at big tech and big energy, I see there's more blurring of the lines. Big tech is having to get savvier about energy. They now have, key men, so to speak, and executives in those posts trying to crack some of those codes for the future. And then you have big energy also realizing that this is in fact, a driver of future business and that they need to play in the space. They need to play in the space connected to the digital economy and learn the language of all that and how to partner properly. We've seen a lot of different kinds of announcements, but I think in the future there's going to be more of these silos breaking down. And that was in fact what the purpose was of the AI summit that my good colleague Ann Blunser, the director of the Ham Institute, put together at the end of April, trying to get people in the room together to start talking. And that was very, very useful. So I also want to mention too the utility Southern, which is Atlanta based, Georgia. Now, Atlanta is a big digital infrastructure data center market as well. Dallas is obviously Northern Virginia, data center alley is, but Atlanta is growing, and a lot of it has to do with their reliable power supply. And the CEO of Southern mentioned that they had spent $20 billion in the last 5 years to upgrade grid infrastructure, and that they expect to spend 20 more billion in the next 5 years. And that this growth in demand could continue intensely for at least 5 years. And I think that's absolutely right. If you think about what is happening with the training stages and some of the big data centers being built, like the Stargate project, in Abilene and various gigawatt size data centers. So I definitely think that this is the case. And it's really interesting too to see some of the different strategies with like Google and Meta and Amazon, how they're evolving with their AI strategies and monetizing. And so I think that's going to be something to be watching in the future. But right now, as far as a portfolio split, I've always had a large energy portfolio and tech portfolio. It's all in those areas. And now I'm almost seeing, this traditional like bonds and stocks 60/40 or whatever the split was. For me, it's like energy and tech 60/40, and it's moving around for me. So those are all my thoughts to do with tech conglomerates adoption and the energy equations. Thanks.